big picture, you told our Scarlet Fu, Wilbur, the action in Iran is long overdue. You're not alone in that thinking. We've heard other people on Bloomberg say that. You also believe that this war is temporary in nature, even if we don't exactly know when it ends. What do you believe is the long-term impact of this war when it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to global markets? How do you think about it?
I think this war will make less likely armed conflict elsewhere, because people have now seen that, at least under President Trump, U.S. is willing to use its enormous military wealth and strength to deal with threats. That was not at all clear under the Biden administration, nor under the Obama. So I think part of the reason so much trouble boiled up was that they viewed us as a paper tiger. But with what happened in Venezuela, what's happening now in Iran, and what's probably going to happen very quickly in Cuba, I think people have seen the sleeping dragon is no longer sleeping. Sleeping dragon is perfectly ready to put its fangs wherever they're needed. So I think the old saying holds true. The best way to avoid a war is if everybody knows you're fully prepared, not only to pursue it, but to win it.
You mentioned Venezuela, you mentioned Cuba, you mentioned Iran. At this point, Secretary, who else has been put on notice?
Well, everybody's been put on notice. I think ultimately China and Russia are on notice. Well, we haven't done much about invading Russia and probably won't initiate anything like that. We have provided support of one kind or another to Ukraine, and we certainly have been arming Taiwan, and even more importantly, we've been moving a lot of the semiconductor technology from Taiwan to the United States. So we're becoming both less vulnerable in the event something happens on Taiwan, and yet also showing that we're very interested in it.
You know, I find it interesting, Wilbur, that you went to Russia. And I just think, you know, and maybe you can give some insight into President Trump, because I think there are things that are said that seem to indicate a friendship, a camaraderie with a certain leader, be it President Putin. And yet it sounds like from what you said that Russia needs to be kind of on guard when it comes to the United States. Help us understand President Trump and who he sees as true allies and who he sees as foes.
Well, in terms of Russia, my point is a very simple one. Russia has had a terrible struggle with Ukraine, a much smaller, much weaker country. And in fact, lately, the last report I've seen, the Ukrainians regained 125 square miles of territory that Russia had previously occupied there. So clearly the Russian war, after all these years, all these vast numbers of deaths, all this destruction, both to Russia and Ukraine, they haven't really gotten as far as they thought. I think if Russia had had any idea that the Ukrainian war would go the way it has, I don't think they would have gone in. They thought it would be an easy cakewalk, and they were wrong. Now roll that forward.
Well, is that the same with how you see maybe the U.S. approach on Iran? Forgive me for interrupting, but I think there was a thinking that this was going to be a lot easier. Do you agree?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think, in fact, it has gone better than any expectation we could have had. Who would have thought that within the first couple of weeks we would get total air superiority? Who would have thought we could have knocked out 100 and some odd vessels, virtually the whole series of vessels that Iran has? Who would have thought we could have done as much damage to the missile site and to the nuclear facilities as we have. So I think the war has gone much more rapidly than we could have thought. And I think the most remarkable and fortunate part is that there have been so few American casualties in the war. Now, even one casualty is a horrible thing, and I would have felt a heck of a lot better without it. But when you consider everything, it's been very, very small. My big fear had been American soldiers coming home in body bags week after week after week. I think that would have caused a lot of unrest within our population. But the other big strategic message, we knocked out their air defense mechanism pretty quickly. Iran is essentially defenseless against our attack. And if you roll back to Venezuela, they knocked that out within a few minutes. And guess whose defense system that was? That was the Russian defense system. So you asked, why would Russia give second thoughts? I think they would give second thoughts because they've just seen what it means to have the U.S. push too far.
Right. We're speaking with Wilbur Ross, Chairman, President, and CEO of Ross Acquisition Corp., also former U.S. Secretary of Commerce. Mr. Secretary, you mentioned the movement of chip production from Taiwan to the United States that's happening very slowly, and analysts don't know if it can ever happen completely. But you are known for your investments in industries that were once thought long gone, especially in the U.S., steel plants, textile mills. The president certainly wants to bring back that type of manufacturing to the United States and build it up here. I'm curious on your view about how national security concerns are changing that globally. Apart from semiconductors, how are you thinking about some of these other industries that the president is supporting?
Well, he's supporting all technology, and I think that's the right direction to go, because any future war is going to be fought in space and in cyber. So I think directionally, he could not be more correct than what he's doing. I also think that he's correct in fostering AI, because AI is what will produce more productivity and therefore more economic growth. Every big technological innovation has always had the longer term effect of adding jobs, but it redefines them. So we need to be sure that our educational system can keep up with the needs for an increasingly technical economy. And as long as it does, I think we'll be there. Now, why is that important? The way we won World War II and the way I believe Reagan won the Cold War was the Russian military and the Russian civilian economy could not keep up with him. And therefore, at the end of the day, a very, very key component of defense strategy is economic power.